okay, no problem.
I'm ready. Audio is clear, so no issues.
Very clear, very clear. Everything is clear.
Okay, we're ready.
Yes, so let's go live. Acha, do we?
इंट्रोडक्शन में बहुत टाइम नहीं लगाना, मैं तो बार बार
1 minute.
Do we start with university song or not today?
Not today, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
We're live now.
Okay. $93 हो गए ऑलरेडी अपने पास.
We can start. People will keep trickling.
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
We have about more than 200 yesterday. They will come. They'll come.
आ जाएंगे, आ जाएंगे.
Yeah, yeah.
टाइम लगता है कई बार लोगों. It's okay. We can start.
Good morning, everybody. Namaskar.
Good morning, Jayanti ma'am. Good morning.
Looking forward to listening to Sudesh ji.
And she's looking lovely. Just have a look at her.
As always.
Lovely.
बॉम्बे वाली सिटी में जाना पड़ता है तो थोड़ा मैच तो करना पड़ता है ना. Anyway, it's always feel good if you feel yourself comfortable with yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Amazing, you SNDT group is some, we say in our area note, the evil eyes do like that. You team keep working 24/7 with something new, you know, in such a gloomy world situation that is there.
Sujata is lucky to have a very good team.
Yes, absolutely lucky.
Company.
Yes, yes, very lucky, very lucky.
Session alive and give us a diversion from the otherwise gloomy.
Very true.
God bless you with the best, all of you.
Very true, very true. Otherwise, we all get succumbed to that depression. You know, in Bombay, Delhi, it is so bad, and
everywhere it's so sad.
Yeah, even Hyderabad. Till my son got married, it was much better. After that, it just deteriorated. Like the cases in Hyderabad.
Relatively, we are doing a bit better. I find people more disciplined also. At least my side of Sikandrabad.
कुछ नहीं है.
Mumbai is slightly better.
और सारी इधर उधर की बातें. कल शाम को एक SOS था कि एक पर्सन विद स्पेशल नीड्स, उसके दोनों पेरेंट्स हो गई, सो वन विल टेक हिम. हेलो, लाइक कि कोई कंडीशन नहीं पता थी, फिर भी बाद में जाके मेरी बरुआ ने बोला कि शी विल टेक केयर. और शी सेज आई एम रिसीविंग सिमिलर मैसेज फ्रॉम मेनी प्लेसेस, आई एम सेइंग यस टू एवरीवन. सो people are helping on these crises.
People are, it's more people who are coming forward and helping.
नहीं, और सबसे ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम है, many people are around 20+ age group.
Small babies are acquiring now. My niece's daughter is just 9-year-old. She's got positive. There are so many kids who have lost their parents, so there are children out there for adoption. Small babies.
We really don't even know what is the total picture in the
the reality is far worse than what is being projected in the
we
newspaper.
Need to be thankful for every day.
Every day is a bonus day. Every day is a bonus day for us.
Absolutely.
Hi everybody.
Good morning, Aloka ji. Good morning.
Namaskar Aloka ji.
Namaskar. कैसे हो सब?
Each day a blessing.
The way we were discussing, that is the way things are as you joined.
You know what? I told you this story, no? This guy with intellectual disability in Kolkata, he refused to wear a mask. And his father persisted. He wouldn't. So had this enormous showdown, and the father finally strangled him to death.
Just imagine.
He was 39,
Oh,
40
God.
years old.
Oh God.
No, it's very
Just couldn't understand, why do I have to wear a mask and why should I? So
Yeah, people with autism, again, they're so set in their
exactly.
routines. Everything is changing. So it is, I mean, you see
Wendy,
that
let's start.
aggression, temper tantrums in children so much.
Chalo, shuru karo.
We can start.
We are
So
117 now. Yeah.
we are 117 participants, so I think
We can start. We can
begin
start.
now.
They'll keep coming. Yeah.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2. A gentle reminder to keep all your mics on mute during the course of the sessions. Please be careful about trying out the share screen option. It causes interruptions and disrupts the session itself. Let's try and make this webinar enjoyable for the resource persons also, as much as they are making it for us. Let's begin our today's session without any further delay. Our first speaker for today is Professor Sudesh Mukhopadhyay. Her topic is Evolving Legislations for Inclusive Education. I have the privilege today to introduce ma'am, though she needs no introduction to many of us who are part of the field of special education. Professor Mukhopadhyay is a former chairperson, Rehabilitation Council of India, head Department of Inclusive Education, UPA, and director SCRT Delhi. She is consulted by the Government of India, NGOs, and international agencies such as BRAC Bangladesh, AusAid, CRS, Plan India, Reach India, UNESCO, UNICEF, USAID, and World Bank, etc. As a professor with NUPA, she was involved in activities like planning and management of education at all levels, with a special focus on education of persons with disabilities, including training, advocacy, along with research and material development. Ma'am, as a senior expert in the field of special education, plays a very active role in the planning and implementation of the current changing trends in education. She is a dear guide and mentor to DSC, constantly encouraging and motivating us to do more, to push the envelope and create new boundaries. Welcome, ma'am. We really look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, you can share my screen. And in the meanwhile, I'm really thankful to all of you, those who can I see on the screen, those who I cannot, and those who may be there on YouTube and other medias. Yes, with age, you do get such a CV, but don't forget, somewhere we all start, even I started as a teacher in a rural school, है ना? और ऐसा रूरल स्कूल जहाँ पे पानी का घड़ा भी सिर पे रख के लाना पड़ता था, है ना? ये मेवात का एक छोटा सा गांव है नगीना करके, और वहाँ पे हम पहले लेसन्स अपने सीखते हैं, तब हम लोगों को तो बहुत सारी वोकैबुलरी भी नहीं पता थी जो शब्द आज की डेट में हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं, लेकिन ये बच्चे हमारे साथ हमेशा से थे और शायद हमेशा से दुनिया में भी रहे होंगे, हिस्ट्री में भी रहे होंगे, नहीं तो कल जो कुछ हम लोगों को पुन्हानी साहब बता रहे थे कि जो हम 1974 में कायम अपने यहाँ पे भी क्लेम करते हैं पहली स्कीम, या हम सार्जन कमीशन की बात करते हैं, सवाल यह है कि उससे 100 साल पहले भी बहुत कुछ कहीं पर हो रहा था. मुझे पूरा रेफरेंस तो याद नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन ऊटी या साउथ के अंदर एक ब्लाइंड पर्सन ब्रिटिश पीरियड में भी कॉलेज में पढ़ाता था. तो वी कैन इमेजिन कि आज जो कुछ हम बातें करने जा रहे हैं वो क्यों इसका नाम सुजाता ने इवॉल्विंग लेजिस्लेशन दिया, और मुझे बहुत सारी चिंता में भी डाल दिया कि मैं इस टॉपिक को कैसे जस्टिफाई करूंगी कल. लेकिन आई एम थैंकफुल टू पुन्हानी एंड मनी कि उन लोगों ने मेरी मदद की है कि मैं अपने थॉट्स को थोड़ा और अधिक क्लियर करके आपके सामने पेश कर सकूं. सो आई विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट इवॉल्विंग लेजिस्लेशन, इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन. इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन की डिटेल्स में नहीं जाऊंगी क्योंकि और बहुत सारे सेशंस भी हैं और आप लोगों के लिए ये कॉन्टिन्यूटी है. इट इज नॉट द फर्स्ट टाइम मैनी ऑफ यू आर अटेंडिंग, मैनी ऑफ यू आर प्रैक्टिसिंग. सो लेट अस गो टू द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. जो मेरी दूसरी नेक्स्ट स्लाइड है, उसकी तरफ मैं आपका ध्यान करूंगी। ये कल मैंने बेटी का काम भी बढ़ाया, क्योंकि शाम को बैठ करके मैंने फिर से लेजिस्लेशन शब्द के ऊपर रिसर्च शुरू की। मेरी अच्छी आदत भी कह सकते हो, खराब आदत भी कह सकते हो, लेकिन हमें ये बात जो, as I was saying, the terms which we use, what is a policy, what is a bill, what is a legislation, what is an act, what is a program, what is a scheme, ये ऐसे छोटे छोटे स्टेप्स हैं जो हमारे लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रखते हैं। यहाँ पर मैंने आपको एक बॉक्स के अंदर एक कंपैरिजन अवेलेबल था बिटवीन लेजिस्लेशन एंड पॉलिसी। हो सकता है अक्षर बहुत छोटे हों, आप लोग ना भी पूरी तरह से पढ़ पाए, लेकिन चिंता करने की कोई बात नहीं है। जो मैंने थोड़ा लार्जर फॉन्ट के अंदर आपको दिया है, उसमें आप देख सकते हैं that policies are a course of action that a government plans to take, and policies are just decisions that set the floor for the long term goals, but legislation are actual laws। और legislation शब्द का ही मतलब होता है जिसको हम enforce कर सकते हैं through actual laws। वो उसकी रीढ़ की हड्डी है। लॉज वो पावर देती है लेजिस्लेशन कि कल हम कानूनी रूप पर अपनी चीजों के लिए मांग कर सकते हैं। राइट होगा कहने से राइट नहीं होता है जब तक कि वो इन्फोर्स नहीं होता। और जैसे कि कल पुनानी जी ने भी बोला, मनी ने भी बोला, उसके लिए कई बार हमें अपने अधिकारों के लिए लड़ना भी पड़ता है। मैं कुछ आगे चल के इन पॉइंट्स को क्लियर भी करूंगी। और लेजिस्लेशन अपने आप में एक डेमोक्रेटिक प्रक्रिया भी है, बिकॉज इट रिक्वायर्स वोटिंग टू एंश्योर दैट दे आर पास्ड। इसीलिए आप लोगों को पता है कि आज जो हम लेटेस्ट एक्ट की बात करते हैं 2016 की, वो 2010 से चल रहा था। 16 में जाकर के वो रूप ले पाया जिसकी कल पुनानी साहब ने की। लेकिन उससे भी बड़ी बात, अगर इतिहास में पीछे 1995 में चले जाए, पहले एक्ट की हम बात करें डिसेबिलिटी की, तो देखिए उसके लिए एक अज्ञात व्यक्ति, जिसका हमें कल पूरा मैं नाम भी उसका कैच नहीं कर पाई, जो मिनिस्ट्री के अंदर जेएस थे या किसी और लेवल पे काम कर रहे थे, उनका कितना बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन है कि उन्होंने ये एक नुक्ता ढूंढ के निकाला जो फिर से किसी लेजिस्लेशन, किसी डॉक्यूमेंट का हिस्सा है, जो ये कहता है कि अगर कोई हमारा देश किसी इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटी पर या उस पर साइन करेगा, एग्री करेगा, तो चाहे वो विषय स्टेट सब्जेक्ट हो या सेंट्रल सब्जेक्ट हो या कंकरेंट लिस्ट पर हो, केंद्रीय सरकार उस पर नियम बना सकती है। अगर ये सब नहीं होता, अगर उस व्यक्ति ने वो सब ढूंढ के, उस समय जो हमारे एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर थे केसरी जी, उन्होंने वो सिग्नेचर चाइना में जाके नहीं किए होते, तो आज शायद हम बहुत सारी बातों को, जो ये टॉपिक है इवॉल्विंग, तो मेरे हिसाब से इवॉल्विंग जो है शब्द, आई एम रियली थैंकफुल टू सुजाता कि उन्होंने मुझे प्रॉम्प्ट किया, उनकी टीम ने ये वाला टॉपिक दे करके। अगला स्लाइड ले लेंगे युक्ति, सॉरी। और इसीलिए मैंने आज की अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन को 3 हिस्सों में बांटा है, लेकिन उससे पहले एक सवाल आप लोगों को सोचने के लिए छोड़ दिया है। मैं इसका जवाब नहीं देने वाली हूँ, आप लोगों को अपने आप अपने व्यक्तिगत स्तर पर ढूंढना होगा कि क्या इंक्लूजन जब हम शब्द इस्तेमाल करते हैं, और जो द थिंग्स विच कम टू अवर माइंड, आर दे रियली डिफरेंट व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इक्वालिटी एंड इक्विटी। क्योंकि यह एक ग्रुप विशेष का संबंध नहीं है, ये हम सबका संबंध है। हम सबको कहीं ना कहीं अलग ढंग से एक इक्वालिटी और इक्विटी की लड़ाई लड़नी पड़ती है, कभी जेंडर के बेसिस पे, कभी लोकेशन पर, कभी जाति पे, कभी धर्म पर, कभी ग्लोबल सिटीजन होने के नाते भी हमें ये करना, जैसे माइग्रेशन हो जाता है, डिपोर्टेशन हो जाता है, बहुत सारी बातें होती है। तो इक्वालिटी एंड इक्विटी, और इसलिए मैंने अपने प्रेजेंटेशन को 3 हिस्सों में बांटा है। हिस्ट्री ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन भी कह सकते हैं, और इसको आप इवॉल्विंग लेजिस्लेशन भी कह सकते हैं। और मैंने उसमें आपको कुछ दायरे दिए हैं। क्या हम एजुकेशन की दृष्टि से ही इसे देखें? शुड वी सी इट फ्रॉम सोशल जस्टिस व्यू पॉइंट, विमेन एंड चाइल्ड, हेल्थ एंड अदर मिनिस्ट्री? व्हाई आई पुट विमेन एंड चाइल्ड ऑल्सो? क्योंकि जब बच्चा जन्म भी नहीं लेता तब से ही कहीं पर उसके कुछ अधिकार बनने शुरू हो जाते, और उनके लिए भी हमारे देश में कानून है। और जो बच्चा अगर आज की डेट में जैसे सोनोग्राफी हो जाता है, पता भी चल जाता है कि ये बच्चा हो सकता है कल को पूरी तरह से स्वस्थ ना हो, तो क्या उसे रखना चाहिए या उसे वहीं पे खत्म कर देना चाहिए? इसलिए मुझे लगता है ये इक्विटी, इक्वालिटी और ये लेजिस्लेशन, ये हमारा प्रीनेटल से लेकर के जब तक हम सांस लेते हैं तब तक ये हमारा इतिहास है, और इसके अंदर हमारे पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज का एक अपनी अलग जगह बन जाती है। इसलिए मैंने इस पॉइंट को सबसे ऊपर रखा। दूसरा, बेसिस ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन क्या है? क्योंकि हम लोग कुछ इस बारे में चिंतित थे प्रीनेटल डेथ्स के बारे में, इसीलिए कुछ नियम कानून बने क्या? या कोर्ट ने हमारी मदद की, या डाटा था जिसने हमें इंस्पायर किया लेजिस्लेशन के, या ये इंटरनेशनल डेक्लेरेशंस ने ही हमें इस रास्ते पर लेकर आए? और क्या अगर पॉलिसी नहीं होती तो ये सब कुछ होता या नहीं होता? तो ये बेसिस ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन के पॉइंट्स हैं। और तीसरा जो सबसे बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है कि हर कथन का, हर पॉलिसी का, हर नीति का, हर एक्ट का एक उसकी एक आत्मा होती है, एक उसके शब्द होते हैं जो जिसे हम कहते हैं कॉन्क्रीट है, जिन्हें हम पढ़कर इंटरप्रेट करते हैं, और एक उनके पीछे छुपा हुआ भाव है। जैसे अपनी एक शब्दावली ही है, डिसेबल्ड पर्सन एंड पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी, दो शब्द हैं, लेकिन क्या उनके पीछे निहित जो शब्द अर्थ है उसका इफेक्ट हमारे सोच पर पड़ता है? और इन्हीं चीजों को ध्यान में रखते हुए मेरा अगला टेक्निकल स्लाइड है, बेटी अगली स्लाइड पे अपन चलेंगे, एजुकेशन डेवलपमेंट एट ए ग्लास। तो मैं इन्हीं ये जो 3 पॉइंट्स मैंने आपको रखे हैं उसी की तरह से आगे बढ़ूंगी, लेकिन बहुत संक्षिप्त में बोलूंगी। मैंने यहाँ पे 2 कॉलम्स आपको दिए हैं। एक तरफ मैंने कमीशंस की बात की है, एजुकेशन कमीशन 1964-66, यहाँ से एक तरह से हमारा इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन का, जिसे हम कहना चाहिए ठीक तरह से डॉक्यूमेंटेड हिस्ट्री जो है वो शुरू होती है लेजिस्लेशन के व्यू पॉइंट से। क्योंकि कमीशन अपने आप में रिकमेंडेशंस करता है, लेकिन वो अपने आप में एक्ट्स या इन्फोर्समेंट नहीं बन जाता। हाँ बोलो।
Ma'am, there's a request from the participants to have more English, because
fine.
they are
I'll do
from the international and from
Okay.
South India, so they're not getting Hindi.
So I will do that. So
Sorry for
anyway,
interrupting.
no, I am fine with that. I thought maybe they will prefer Hindi because English things are already written. So anyway, the Education Commission is a commission, remember. It can make recommendations, but it does not mean that you can go to court on the basis of a commission till some more steps are forward. And that is why first national policy on education, we say is 1968, which became the basis of a national policy. The whole document was accepted as a national policy. Till that time, we did not have a history of having any policy. And this policy is important from many angles, even whatsoever is happening in the name of science and development, so many other things, pedagogy, teacher education, any area you touch. But one of the important takeaway from this commission was that it recognized the need for the education of children. So the handicapped word was used, and it also said that a cell should be established in NCERT. Because please remember, NCERT itself and many organizations of that nature have also been really encouraged and established because of this national commission. But commission's presentation started earlier, but this particular recommendation, which was to start work on IED, and it should start something like in NCERT, this did not happen till early 1980s. It took so much of time to reach that point. And in between, we have it as a part of social justice. That time it was social welfare. And we have a scheme. I will give you a synoptic picture of all these developments. Second policy is of 1986, which also started a practice of having program of action, how it should be done. And that is called the program of action, which was again revised in 1992 because there was a change of government. Acharya Ramurthy committee came in between and new program of action was made, and latest what we have. But what happened in the name of equity, and what I want to all of you to understand it, that irrespective of the commission and committees and the acts which we have, everything has been given in the name of equality and equity. And that is why I raised that question. Is inclusion different than equality and equity? Because all those things, they are coming under that. So common school system, neighborhood schools, alternative schools, these were the type of schools which were talked about, and our special schools as we use in our sector, they were never mentioned separately in that. Though in Modalia Commission, you can find references to private managed schools, but not in this commission. The special school as a category of school were never included. And that is why maybe we have lost out certain things in time on the timeline. Second is the universalization. It started as a program of DPEP, District Primary Education Program. Later on, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan came, Samagra Shiksha came, and National Curriculum came. So you can see there is a link between what happens as a part of legislation decision and what happens in the ground to enact those things. There is a very deep relationship. Next slide, I will make this thing further clear. If you look here, I am jumping from National Policy of 1968 to NEP 2020, and still I am continuing with the thread of equalization of educational opportunity. Now, if I look at 1968 policy as the benchmark for this evolving of the concept of inclusion, they say regional imbalances in the provision of educational facilities should be corrected and good facilities should be provided in the rural and other backward area. And this particular thread further goes through somewhere under school mapping, somewhere under district planning, cluster planning and all, till we reach our 2020 policy, which says special educational zones. If you will read carefully this document, you will understand the spirit still remains the regional imbalances. Similarly, if we go to the next one, to promote social cohesion, national integration, common school system, all those things, and that all special schools like public schools should be required to admit students on the basis of merit and also provide. If you read this whole paragraph at leisure in greater depth with understanding and reflection, again, you will see same things are again interwoven in the chapter 6 and 7 of the NEP 2020, on which many times during last 1 year, you have got exposure. So I will not go, maybe Dr. Aloka Guha and some other person may also be touching upon. So I'm not going into the details, but to make that point of inclusion and equality. Then the education of the girls, again see the chapter 3 of the NEP. Then see intensive effort to develop education among the backward classes, and especially from the tribal, again chapter 6, 7 and NEP. And the last is again educational facilities for the physically and mentally handicapped children should be expanded, and attempts should be made to develop integrated education programs enabling the handicapped children to study in regular school. That is where the first seed formally as a legislative thing happened, which continues till we reach our today's policy of NEP 2020. So if I go to the next slide, we will go quickly because again, it is a very familiar, but it is a summarization of what I have been talking till this particular point, yesterday and today. Inclusion is ultimately about our perceptions and belief. And this particular diagram is one of the UN documents only from where it has been revolving, and many of us have been using. You can say it is not child who has to fit into the system, but system has to become flexible enough. And flexible, it can become only you and me can make the system flexible, because you and me are also part of system. So our next slide. This is where inclusion is the provision of services to students with disabilities, including those with significant disabilities in a neighborhood school. Now, neighborhood, you can take the word literally, you can take it as common school, you can take it with 3-kilometer radius and whatsoever distance. See, for example, if school complexes come, again, the concept will get different. But what is important is every child should have access to schooling. So in that way, if you look at intention and read the things in between the lines of whether 68 policy, 80, and again, note the difference, national policy on, national policy or on, and then you change a new policy on education. So the same words are being are organized, and the years also 68 and 86, it can be done both ways, but our 2020 is different. But again, look at the spirit of 2009 RT Act and its amendments, the RPWD Act and our new educational policy. We are continuously, so the legislation also has been evolving only on these lines and getting in greater depth, greater nitty-gritties. And next is the summative slide for this section. Where next slide. This you may not be able to read, but again, the legal instruments, they have come through 5-year plans. They were the first arrangements under which whatsoever was decided, how resource allocation was done, how things were taken up by the states, how the center was starting. Our first educational plan, inclusion, was under Ministry of Social Welfare. And that is where our that 1974 scheme later on comes, only because of that reason, because it was seen as a welfare activity. Then if you move further, a second plan, third plan, increase facilities for disability, persons with disabilities. Ministry of Education created an advisory group. There was surveys, there were NGOs who were taking up. In between, there was not much activity. It was a rest period for 5-year plan, but Education Commission was working, which I have already explained to you. It was only 68 onwards, during 4th and 5th plan, we have IED in the Ministry of Social Welfare, which was a selective coverage. It was not throughout the India, all the state, no. It was block-wise planning, which was done, and few states, they used to cover. There was some amount of money which was given to the teachers as an incentive. It was only, and this incentive thing, you will be surprised when in 1986 policy was being made, and when we established the cell at NCERT in somewhere in 83, 84, where I was also one of those first person who got trained to work in this area when that cell was being established. We had a ground level study of this 1974 scheme. And you know how the evolving things happen? It was a tough task for us to locate where this scheme is there in a given state. Somewhere it was social welfare, somewhere it was with education, somewhere it was mass education, somewhere was it technical education. It was all over the place. And we have to collect information, plus also see how these provisions under these particular schemes are working on the ground. And I remember when in one of the schools in Rajasthan we had a child with mental retardation in class 1. He was 15 years old. He was not promoted to the next class. They were not able to tell the parents to take away the child, because a lump sum was given to the parents of the children with disabilities. It means we did not have a legislation about how to take a decision for how long to retain a child in a particular class. And you know what the teachers were saying? They were saying, ma'am, we don't need this 125. If you give me 125 as a teacher being responsible for a child with disability in my school, then this child only belongs to me. Madam, this child should belong to the whole school. So this is how some of the things which today you are seeing, you are feeling and practicing, that is how these legislations have affected us over a period of time, and there have been changes. So if you will go through this particular slide at your leisure, I will just quickly now cover it up. So in say in 80 to 85, IDC scheme was shifted to the MHRD, and there were sample surveys, and we also became part of the International Year of the Disabled 1981. But still, we did not become a signatory. Remember, 7th plan, it was NGO, women and disabled in the same tone. There was not much depth. Still, we have not arrived. 86, the next, 1986 policy came. And because in NCRT, we had already started working on this. We were, and with the help from NEPA, where the policy was being drafted, we could add a chapter on education of the handicapped, where first time some data, some direction was given on the basis of which government could launch programs and schemes. But again, to get that piece of legislation, it has to be passed in Central Advisory Board of Education. Since I was part of that history, I remember it was a hell of a task to have 700 pages of our work got stenciled, photocopied, not photocopied, it was duplicating machines, get that 50 sets ready and send it to the CABE meeting with less than 36 hours at our disposal. But because we could do that at that point of time, and we had work at the ground level to show from NCRT's forum, and thanks to the then director of NCRT, late Professor Malhotra, we were able to get it through in the CABE, and that is where the final, what to say, push up for the things came. And also we must give full credit to then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Yes, Rajiv Gandhi also, and previous to him, to Madam Indira Gandhi, because it was 1981 was because of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi that country started waking up to this, and 1986 policy was signed when Rajiv Gandhi was our Prime Minister. So 8th plan, that is where yesterday's remarks by Punhani become very, very important, the PwD Act 1995, because we became first time signatory to the international commitment. RCI came into existence, district primary education program came. Again, it did not have a component of disability in the initial stages. Persons like Professor Jangira, myself, and few others of our team, Indumati Dave, and many of known and unknown persons in the field, we all put a pressure on the World Bank to have inclusive education in the thing. And internationally also, though global monitoring reports started coming after, this was also the period when IFA and all those developments were happening at the international level, but global monitoring report did not have it till 2002. Again, we have to fight out at the international levels also to get it done. And then is the history, which all of you are quite famous. You know, the again, it was to Javed. The credit goes for having our National Action Plan for inclusion of education of children and youth with disability, because higher education was not still taking it up. It was only for school education. But when he asked this question on the parliament, this question was raised, and then Education Minister Arjun Singh Ji gave a commitment. So then ministry started developing this scheme, and I'm very happy that from NEPA, I was one of the anchors who really finalized this scheme, and we declared, and of course, Mithu Aloo And there were many others who were also with us in that. And though Desi Rajuji started this work, but it was Mr. Kunthia was the secretary, joint secretary education, under whose signature this particular document was signed and put into practice. Later on, it gets submerged as IEDSS, RMSA, RT, 2008, 2012 histories. You all are very familiar to, and our RT Act, RPWD Act, all those things. I'm not going to go into the greater details because it will be covered by many of us. But I will like you to look at the role of Niti Aayog now, which is in place of the 5-year plans. That's why I'm putting up this slide for you, because Niti Aayog now prepare the say 3-year plan, 5-year plan, something like that. It started preparing the 3 years action agenda of 2017 to 2020. And under that, our Samagra Shiksha was this thing. And we also have the choice of schools under RPWD 2018. And now, because through Niti Aayog, we are also answering from our achievements in inclusion on persons with disabilities for the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, which yesterday Dr. Mani was referring to. So let us go to the next slide now. So what are the general legal provisions flowing from all this presentation, which I have been making to you, is that the legal provisions, as yesterday was also mentioned, first thing, it comes out from our constitution itself, where we talk about equity and equality. Then educational laws which have been made for the persons with disabilities. Now this terminology is not mine. That is why I have not changed. Otherwise, I would have said for persons with disabilities. And that is why I have given you the reference upstairs. Upstairs, I mean at the top, from where I have just drawn it, because if you will go to this website, you will get many more details. I am encouraging you indirectly to go and refer to these documents later on. And health laws, family laws, because succession laws for persons with disabilities also equally very, very important. The labor laws, judicial procedures for the persons with disability, income tax concessions, relief for the handicapped. Somewhere when these all things are put together, the whole scenario of inclusion in real sense, it starts emerging. If we only see from education point of view, then the picture is never complete for us, because again, education is also in a way a means to serve many of the other things which have been listed by this particular group of persons, where they are saying guidelines for parents of children with disability, their legal rights, because rights sometimes can overlap with each other. That is the point I am making. Then when we look at this thing, we need to be very, very careful. So now let us go to the next slide. Again, it is also a summary of that. And here yesterday, as I again said, though we are talking about 2016, but please don't forget, don't ignore the Persons with Disability Act 1995, which has got about 9 sections on main provisions of the Act: prevention and early detection, education, employment, affirmative action, non-discrimination, research, social security, and grievance. Because many of the legal cases which are even being decided in 2010, 12, 9, 8, they are having their roots in 1995 Act, which has brought a lot of clarity what ultimately emerged in the 2016 Act. So that is why I thought I will put this slide also. Then we also have Mental Health Act, Rehabilitation Council Act, National Trust Act, and UN Declaration on the Rights of Mentally Retarded Persons, because ultimately, as a parent, as a teacher serving at the grassroots level, all those things somewhere empower us to advocate the rights of persons with disability, and then only these legislations have got any meaning. The next slide, if we go now. Next slide. Same aim, RPWD Act and NEP 2020. This slide is an inspiration from Madam Aloka Guha's one of the older presentation. When I saw that change society, this RP, she has developed a very good comparison of the this thing, and maybe in her presentation she will also explain it further. But what is very important is that when NEP says that it endorses the act fully, we need to understand the nitty-gritty of this act itself to deliver the things as teachers, teacher educator, parents, NGOs, legal persons, and whatever other capacity we may be working, because making them independent, giving them dignity, these are the ultimate goals of education also. Education is not about getting a certificate to pass something, and inclusive education is a means, a system of education where all children can be there. So these are the things which we need to be covered. A question has come. I will be responding to it in next of my few slides. Just wait, please. Next slide, please. Now, this is where the theoretical things will also come to an end, that I have listed all the few chapters if you want to see it, but I will draw your attention to this yellow box. Even as we are talking to each other, we are explaining, things are happening on the ground, and we need these rules and acts which tomorrow, now they are part of legislation. Right of person with disability rules, because act by itself does not give us the pathways how to claim our rights. The rules are very, very important. That is where the implementation starts. And then you have the guidelines for evaluation assessment of autism and procedure for certification. In 2017 it was given. And then there is a notification on guidelines of assessment of various specific disabilities in 2018. But the challenge is that this 2017, whatsoever procedure has been given, has not been again referred or highlighted in the 2018 Act. So if any person with autism tomorrow has to use this legal provision, they will have to negotiate between both these gadget notification, because that also becomes something which are enforced, where you can go to the courts, where you can ask for interpretation and clarification. And last is the list of central government's posts in A, B, C, and D. No, in between is the National Commission for Allied and Health Professional Bill 2020 passed in 2021. ये अभी February, March में ही इसका notification हुआ है. We also need to look at that, कि now how person with disability, whether as a teacher, whether as a lab assistant, whether as a sport teacher, whether as a class A gazetted officer, anywhere, it gives a detail. It is 150 pages document, so I'm not able to share during this presentation. I can share it. I have already, I think, shared with the SNDT. If not, I will do. They can share you the PDF if they want. But this is something which is going to guide both education and employment in the coming years. It's very, very important. It also says, whatever this act was saying, what things are required so that a person with disability can serve, get education with dignity and with full capacity, because reasonable accommodation has been very nicely explained in this National Commission, for this list of central government things. It is a gadget notification, January 2021. And the healthcare professional bills is also important, because many of the therapies and all those things which we are discussing, who will be made available under NEP from the school complexes, ultimately will need these type of persons also, and we need to understand. And also you have to now see where is the boundary of RCI and where is the boundary of the health ministry, and how these two organizations also need to work very closely with each other, like NCT and RCI if our persons have to really get benefit of the legislation which is evolving as even we are talking today. So next slide is on the curriculum part of it. That is where these regulatory bodies, these significant bodies, what we call the academic bodies, get influenced, impacted, and they need to work on whatsoever is said in these legislative instruments through policy, programs, schemes, different gadget notifications, the National Curriculum Framework, National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education, RT, our RPWD Act, then the National Curriculum Framework 2005 is still the reference point, but other changes are still not done. They were supposed to be done by December 2020. Nothing has happened so far, but maybe by next few months, we will have something more to do about it. So next slide, and here is a advice. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read, this is just a summary thing to just bring all the thing, but most important point is, please remember, we as teachers are not to certify and label any child for benchmark disability. There is a notified process and procedure. We can refer in case we feel concerned, and that is why I have put that yellow box for your reference, and that is also gives us a reason why certain things are not happening at the ground, though we are looking forward for the last few decades now. Next thing. Now the thing, why things are not happening at the ground level, you have to understand this slide. Again, this slide is, I have taken from one of the, I think it was a presentation for the BPA, which was done by one of the international participants. Just now, you're not able to see on the screen the reference, but it is a UNICEF and International Institute of Education Planning 2019, from where that person have taken. But this gives you an idea about how the legislative program and what happens on the ground they work. For example, regulatory framework or our provisions can talk about constitutional provisions, rules, regulation. We can have monitoring mechanism like EMIS, leadership and management to prepare the manpower resources. But ground level realities get bound by teacher recruitment, training, retention. Today, if every school has to have a special teacher, we don't have those many teachers, just as we don't have enough clinical psychologists to do the assessment for all the children with autism. And the thing which I showed you about the health services, they say that 2017 regulation says doctors, psychologists, clinical psychologists. This is the panel which can assess an autistic child. But this allied services thing, psychologists now will be part of allied services of the health ministry, and only clinical psychologists will be with the RCI. Now, these things are going to create confusion and challenging for the people how that certificate will be required. So that is where all these things come, because now if you look at the CBSE new guidelines, they are also telling what all the schools need to do if they have a child with disability. So things are going down, but the speed is not matching our say expectation and our requirements. And that is where today we don't have any answer, in spite of having everything, why things have not changed. Yes, it is, glass has started filling, but it may not be a full glass as yet, while our expectations are that it should be a full bottle, but then the bottle is just filling up. It is not completely full. So next slide, we can skip also, but anyway, do one more click. One more click. बेटे एक क्लिक और करना पड़ेगा शायद. हाँ, हम उसको छोड़ देते हैं. पिछली स्लाइड में मैंने सिर्फ यही दिया था, रीजनेबल एकोमोडेशन का आपको एग्जांपल देने. आई वाज ट्राइंग टू गिव यू एन एग्जांपल, बट आई एम गोइंग टू explain this thing through how court judgments are giving. So I have put it here so that you please remember that learning should be holistic, integrated, enjoyable, and we talk about provisional of reasonable accommodations and all, and how this particular issue also has been taken up by the courts in very, very clear terms. I think somewhere we as the service people who serve the schools, who are really at the level where the child is coming in touch with us, we perhaps are not being able to do the job with that speed as we should do. So next is, so what is the basis of our legislation? Next slide. Basis of legislation, it is concerns, it is court, data, international declaration. For me, as I have been thinking and analyzing this ever since Professor Sujata asked me to speak on this topic, I don't say either or. It is the interaction of all these points, and that is what I have been trying to explain to you through whatever time I have taken to talk to you. I think I'm already running out of time. I never looked at the time. Sorry. So NP 2020 220 में declare हो गई, but अभी तक इसका evidence नहीं आया. So I will move very quickly. You can read it. It is only to make the last point thing. Have we internalized the intention of whatsoever is written? So we can move quickly now, Betty. Please remember, central government plays some role, but just mandate करती है, but actual work also has to be done by the state governments, and those guidelines are there. So we need to work with, this point was explained yesterday by Punani, so I need not explain this slide. Next, we will move quickly now. Now, learning from the court judgments. Here you want to see, that is where this legislation, evolving legislations become very, very important, that it gives an instrument, it gives a tool, a process in the hands of any person who has a grievance, who has suffered, or any other PIL we can do, anything we can do, but we cannot do till this can be done. So I have listed here some of the things. After Delhi High Court judgment of 2009, states are recruiting these special educators, but from vacancy in the general cadre, issue of pay parity. Yesterday, this question was asked, and Punani has given that already equivalence between RCI courses and NCT courses, the equivalence has to be given by the state, not by these two bodies. So if Gujarat state has given that equivalence, Tamil Nadu has given, teachers are part of the general cadre, there is no different cadre for the special educators. Similarly, you also have from the Bombay High Court a judgment where they say कि child recently to allow an autistic child to study in the school in Bombay, lekin they have to have a shadow teacher appointed by the parents. Now, this judgment brings a lot of challenges for the parents who cannot afford to pay for this shadow teacher. So like that, right to education about this CP child what work has to be done. As I said, I have collected all these judgments from one of the website. I will be giving you the reference, which is practically a 27-page document, which I cannot show you here. So this is just a glimpse. Read it at your leisure, that even the right to have a child, if a person with mental retardation has, court has given her a permission that she can also be part of decision, and we cannot take a decision that you abort this child. It happened in Chandigarh. So if you look at the next slide, move forward. Again, I have given you a lot of references here where you can go back and see that our, I will read one paragraph only. For example, India's apex court mandated that UNCRPD should be read into the municipal law. And this was decided in the 2009. Yesterday, one of the participants have pasted it there. So today I decided to paste that judgment here, because once it is done, if it comes to the municipal law, I think 90% of the issues which we are facing today, from the legislation to implementation, this will be helped. And this was again a very good decision which was given by Justice Kesri. My next slide is about Sikri. Just see this next slide. I have put it. He says, our acts, they are the latter. Shabd hai, but it is the spirit of social contest adjudication, which is very, very important. And they say, apart from the social economic inequalities, accentuated the disabilities of the poor in an unequal fight, the adversarial process itself approach to the disadvantage of the weaker. So that is why he says that courts in India had adverted to this social contest technique by drifting from strict adversarial approach for dispensing equal justice. And that was the reason I started with equity and equality, because even courts are with us. And what we needed, next slide, please. What we need is a statutory advocacy. And for this, I want you all to understand, we have to conduct, and this is for Madam Sujata, as well as for the Vice Chancellor, ma'am, if you have a law faculty in any university, we also need to put this particular types of topic in the curriculum of law faculty also, just as if they are required to be put in the medicine courses also. Because until unless all the persons, all professions, they imbibe this evolving from spirit, letter to spirit and spirit to letter type of thinking in our respective professions, we will not be do, because Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life, and it is the spirit, is always the spirit of age. That is what Deepak Mishra said in 2017. So with that, I can we can finish it also, because next slide is again, you can share it, people, they can read, they can go back, and I will not be able to really complete all the judgments and give you all that. And next slide. So I think we can, but what we have missed, if you go to the slide number 27, and then we can finish it also at that point, it's okay. What even the law people also are feel, that the disability law does not provide a transition framework or a timeline for ensuring compliance under the Disabilities Act 2016. That is the problem. Because many law faculty people have said that it is not there in their courses as yet. It is only some volunteers who are taking up this work and doing this work further. And my last slide, if we go to slide number 28, if we can go. Yes, this early intervention thing has been mentioned, and cross-cutting also. But I want to go, I think 30th slide it is, or something on the, yeah, you go to the 30th slide and I can just finish on that. This 40% of disability condition, this has also been challenged in the Supreme Court. I am not able to, I did not share it. I don't know whether I have shared it or not, but I have got the full judgment with me on this. If you remember, I have been asking this question many times, how sacrosanct is this 40% of disability for certain, say, reservations, jobs, one can understand. But when it comes to education and enabling things, there is a very little thing between 39, 40, 40 and 45 sort of thing. So there is a court judgment. I will finish it at this point because Aloka is also here, and I don't know whether questions can be answered or not. But I think let's make it the end slide. It's okay for me, because what I really want to say is that statutory advocacy we must do. We need to, we can have expectation from top to bottom, but until unless from the our own individual levels, we start working upward and saying, now there are provision, legislations are there. They have been evolving over decades, but we still need to work for it. Thanks for listening to me. Sorry if I've taken more time. Thank you.
Well, ma'am, that was perfect.
என்ன அப்பாவுக்கு இஷ்டம் நீங்க பதில் சொல்றீங்க?
क्या हो गया?
नहीं मैम, किसी पार्टिसिपेंट का माइक खुल गया.
कोई बात नहीं, आप देखो आगे कैसे क्या करना है.
हाँ, डॉक्टर भान कुछ बोलना चाह रही थी.
No. I just want to thank Professor Mukhopadhyay for always making things very comprehensive. It's such a huge topic, and she's been telling me what a topic you've given me, but only you could have done justice to it. There is so much of wealth of knowledge in what you have shared, and I think it's for all of us to sit, read these documents. In the background of the explanation that you have given, it will be clearer to all the students sitting in the audience and so many teachers sitting in the audience. In case there is any problem, I'm sure, Betty, you're making arrangements of sending it all across.
Yes.
Ma'am is always there to clarify if anybody has any doubts still. But with the presentation, she set the background. Reading those documents will become more meaningful.
Self-learning is very, very important. We cannot stop.
Yes.
If at my age, even up to before switching on my mic at 11 a.m., if I was reading and trying to still sort out things for you all, so you can understand how important it is to really serve the people whom we claim to serve. We have to continuously. So even, I'm sorry, I didn't leave any time for question answer. But in case there are any questions,
we can mail them to
send
you.
it to me through email, and I will answer personally to each one of them. And whatever material I have sent, I will send it to you as a together, and then you can share it through the link to the people whosoever want it. Thank you very much. Sorry, Aloka, keeping you waiting.
No, you're just on time. Betty, we are on time, right?
Yes, we are.
Thanks.
Sorry. So, thank you, ma'am, for clarifying the basic terminology in relation to the legislations and policies and laws. You've highlighted the evolution of the various legislations and policies and the inherent nuances of that evolution. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Yukti, for managing the slide share. So that brings us to the close of the first session for today. A big thanks to everybody who's been a part of it. We'll take a quick 2-minute loo break and be back. In the meantime, we'll set up the session for Dr. Guha and we will begin. So it's approximately about 12:02 now. If we can all be back by 12:04 so that we don't lose a lot of time. Is that okay with you, Dr. Guha? Ma'am? All right, thank you. So let's all be back by 12:04, please. Thank you. Aloka Guha, ma'am, would you like us to share the PPT or would you want to do it? You're on mute, ma'am.
I think she likes to do it herself. If there is any problem, then maybe you can help.
Ma'am, you're still on mute. Dr. Guha, ma'am. Yes.
Can you co-host me, please, so I can share from my side?
Yes. Done, ma'am.
Done? Okay. Can I try out if I can screen share?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, are you okay with this?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Clear.
Shall I keep it on or?
You can, ma'am.
Let me keep it on, please, in case I mess it up later.
No. It's absolutely fine. Yes, ma'am.
But Sudesh has certainly made my life so much simpler. Thank you so much. You have really helped me to make this carry on from where you stopped. Very extensive. So you should be
With your
very happy.
pictures, I think you're taking it to the classroom, so it will be like it's
Thanks,
flowing
Aloka.
very well. It's flowing very well right from the first session. It's flowing very
Yes.
well.
Going very well.
Yeah,
Right from the first.
Yeah,
one,
right from
correct.
the first one. Right from the first one.
No, I refer to that. I used one of slides, Aloka also. So I said I should tell her also that sometimes it helps us because
Of
someone
course.
has already given a thought to a slide. So reusing is not a bad thing.
It's not.
But then
Not
I
at all.
always like to give credit whosoever I take it from.
Absolutely. That's what makes our team so special, in the field of rehab. It's not a huge group. It's a small group, and we're all like, this camaraderie we have with each other and respect for each other. That's really, really very appreciable. Very appreciable.
And the sharing of the same space.
Yes.
You know, even 30 years ago, people from abroad would come and say, oh, we go to so many conferences in India and it's always the same people.
Yeah.
that same people in inverted commas has not substantially increased.
Yeah.
So we've been sharing space for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
We try to give, I don't know, I share my things very freely, tell people and all, but some of the other, they also now need to come and claim those spaces. I was very happy when Betty and Yukti, when I talked to Sujata, and then they wrote for a journal, and because they have to now come up.
Yes, of course.
They have to now come up and create a space for themselves. And when I see some of these youngsters talking, I really like it, and I sit through their sessions also.
Yes. I mean, we have all, look at me, my journey. Remember our trip to Malaysia, Dr. Sarup, myself and Sudesh ma'am. I was a baby at that time in the field. And I remember looking up to Aloka Di with that, my jaws open. Like, wow, when she would come on the stage and start her presentation. So I've always told her that. So yes, I mean, today I'm sharing the space with you here, but I'm still so much, what should I say, like still learning all the time. That's what I keep saying. Yesterday I spoke to Jayanti ma'am and I told her I can't thank you all enough, with your support and, being there. It's so motivating and so encouraging, I can't tell you.
No, but that is how we all grew up. No?
Yes.
It was not that we were born like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying, that I remember 30 years back where I was and how I've slowly, grown. So it will be the same journey for Betty, Yukti, Apurva, and all others from different...
see, our youngster must learn to start because I don't know, we are not public just now, am I right?
No.
It's only short. See, when on IFA we were having a meeting in NEPA, Govinda asked me to organize. I said, yes, I will organize on one condition. You have to give me a session, And I first time brought this whole issue of why disability is not being monitored as a part of IFA as others are. And then there was a person from Paris, and later on, due to some reason, we have to again repeat that program in Dhaka. And then Gabriel told me, why I never saw. I said, that's not important. But question is, Gabriel, the point I am making and this new module which I have produced, are we going? And after that global monitoring report took that up. Now they come. Up till that time, similarly, we have to fight with World Bank to include it. मजाक उड़ाते थे हमारा, लेकिन जंगीरा साहब थे तो थोड़ा मुझे सपोर्ट भी मिलता था. वो कहते थे अभी मिसेस मुखोपाध्याय विल स्टार्ट कि फॉन्ट बड़ा होना चाहिए, टीचर्स का मटेरियल और डिसेबिलिटी तो है ही नहीं है इसकी. No, but then since Jangira was present there, we could put it there.
Yes.
So question is, if you look at me and Jangira in terms of stature, I was still lecturer and a reader post or something, and Jangira was a much higher post and all, but still you have to have the guts to ask for that space.
Right.
IEDSS के ये जो है स्कीम के लिए मुझे फाइनेंस कमीशन के सामने जाके बैठना पड़ा था मिनिस्ट्री को सपोर्ट करने के लिए. They were not ready to accept कि secondary education तक disability को वो होना चाहिए. It's not an easy battle.
It's not easy.
Normally we don't talk these things in public. There is no need also. सभी लोग कुछ ना कुछ तरह से अब जैसे मैं उस जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी का नाम ढूंढने वाली हूँ जिसने इंटरनेशनल का हमारे विंडो खोली है. I don't know why no one ever referred. It's a great contribution. Sometimes
Yes.
these under secretaries, they play a great role in
Great
whatever
role,
we are
yes.
talking today.
Yes, yes.
We should not undermine there. So every one of us can contribute.
Contribute. Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
all
I
are
agree.
stakeholders.
Yes.
Sorry.
Aloka ji is back, so I
Yes,
will have
yes.
my tea.
Yes.
Betty,
Yes,
tell me
yes,
when
of
I
course.
must stop. Betty,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
there
ma'am.
she
tell me
starts.
when I should stop.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Welcome back to the second session of today. Our resource person is Dr. Aloka Guha. She will be speaking on the perspective on rehabilitation of persons with disability. I now hand over the stage to my colleague, Ms. Sunanda Chakraborty, to do the honors. Sunanda, over to you. Is Sunanda there?
Sunanda, unmute.
Sorry. Okay. So it has been a privilege for me to introduce our next resource person to all of you, audience. Her name means vision, and she has been a visionary to this field. Okay, so I introduce Dr. Aloka Guha to all of you, and she doesn't need any introduction, but I will read out her small bio. So Dr. Aloka Guha ma'am is a special educator trained in Canada in intellectual disability. She has worked for 45 years in the disability sector in India. She has worked with the leading NGOs and closely with the Government of India on legal and policy matters, including the development of GOI's 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th five-year plans. She has been a founder chairperson of National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, and Multiple Disabilities, a statutory autonomous body under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, based in Delhi. She has been a controller of examinations of RCI or Rehabilitation Council of India, a statutory autonomous body under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India in Delhi. She has been the technical officer of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Unit of World Health Organization Southeast Asia Regional Office, New Delhi. And she has been a consultant with Autism Speaks, which supported the government of Bangladesh in the development of its national level multi-sectorial initiative on autism and NDDS. She now is a consultant on legal mandates relating to disability, human rights, in doing the situational analysis, in mentoring and monitoring of internationally funded projects, and in training teachers in inclusive education.
Thank you.
So, thank you, ma'am. So you are welcome here. And
Thank you.
My pleasure. Can I start now?
yeah, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the topic given to me, as usual, very well curated by Dr. Sujata Bhan, and I want to thank her and the Vice Chancellor and Betty and the entire team of SNDT Women's University, the DSE Department of Special Education. So I have been asked to talk about perspectives on disability, and Dr. Bhan said I must speak more elaborately on the RPWD Act, the National Trust Act and the RCI Act, with some perspectives on its implementation. However, my life has been made very simple by Dr. Sudesh Mukhopadhyay. Thank you so much. Who pretends to be very much older than I am, but we are exactly the same age. So I don't call her Sudesh Di, I call her by her name because we are the same age. And yesterday, Dr. Punani and Dr. Mani made their own excellent presentation. So in terms of statutory framework, I've had a lot of background, and I am following in the footsteps of my previous speakers. So this is my first slide. And the second slide tells you what I'm going to talk about today: the legal framework, the statistical framework, the institutional framework, the services framework, and some India-specific issues, which delay and actually very much slow down the implementation of these acts. I'm not talking policies today, except for a little bit on the national education policy. So this is something she talked about. Constitution of India, which is the largest law, highest law in India, doesn't mention disability, but disablement, meaning not being able. So not being able. So weaker and disadvantaged sections are the two key words that have continued from the Constitution into each one of our general laws, which includes the RTE and it includes the NEP. So disability comes under disadvantaged sections or the weaker sections. The UNCRPD is very cross impairment approach, and I was very pleased to be part of that. The Government of India would send me as part of the delegation. I was only special educator in that entire room of lawyers and people with administrative background who represented their initial countries. There was a separate section for people with disabilities. It was the first time in the United Nations that people with disabilities were allowed to come in. And during the winter times, minus 18 degrees outside, wheelchairs would get stuck in the snow. And I remember the people coming in from the UN and apologizing. I'm sorry, this is your home, but it's not a good entry. Next time, for the next meeting, we will ensure that there is wheelchair access. So I've had and the point about UNCRPD, it's very cross impairment approach. Whereas the RTE and its amendments that Dr. Punani talked about yesterday, the big fight that we had with the ministry to include disabled people, that is very specific disability laws. It mentions the PwD Act and it mentions the National Trust Act. So the RPWD, again, is very impairment specific, very category specific, very quota based, and you have to have a disability certificate in order to avail of the laws. NEP only mentions SLD as a specific disability, but very, very pro disability, very pro Divyangjan. They use different terms across the policy. So this is the legal framework in India, which Dr. Sudesh also talked about. SDGs, I'm going to use for 2 slides, and I'm not dwelling on the rest of this, but the 3 disability laws and the education part is the green one, where education, as you know, is now a fundamental right. And the 86th Amendment to the Constitution in 2002 allowed for the RTE to come in 2009, and then the amendments in 2012. So RPD Act was 6 years in the making and got delayed because of political issues, nothing to do with disability. But finally, they broke the logjam in Parliament to say, for this act, all parties will come together, and it was eventually passed unanimously. So the responsibility, the point I'm trying to show in this slide is the responsibility has been cast upon the appropriate governments, and that includes central government, state government, and local government, to ensure that persons with disability enjoy their rights, adhikar, equally with others. The earlier Act, PwD Act, was very protective, supposedly participative, equal opportunities, but didn't look at civil and political rights. There are, as you know, 5 kinds of human rights. There's civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights, and cultural rights. So out of these 5 types of human rights, only economic, social, and cultural issues were mentioned. But this act, RPWD Act, is a rights-based act. That makes it very powerful. It's up to us to implement it, but it is a very good piece of document. The disability has been defined here as an evolving concept. It's not just a fixed quota, and I'll dwell on that. I'm going to skip this slide because Dr. Mukhopadhyay explained the chapters, and she also explained the 21 disabilities. I just want to mention that there are 6 categories. There's a physical category, there's an intellectual category, there's mental behavior, which has only 1 mental illness, and disability due to chronic neurological disorder, blood disorder, multiple disabilities, and 1 other. Why 1 other? Because it leaves enough space for new evolving disabilities to be included. Please remember, we didn't have autism in the earlier act. We didn't have SLD in the earlier act, and why we have them under intellectual disability is left to your imagination. Why it should be under intellectual, because so many of them, a large majority of people with SLD and fixed majority with ASD don't have intellectual implications. But however, we don't have the authority to change this. So I call it a 3-tier legislation, and some people call it 2-tier. One is at 2S, section 2S, persons with disabilities, and then 2F, which is persons with high support needs. These are among the benchmark disabilities, they need intensive care. And then 2R, person with benchmark disabilities, not less than 40%. And even among them, those who have very profound disabilities can apply for high support needs, and those have all been already notified. So let me come to this very important idea of persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments. So far, great. It's similar to our earlier definition. The next part, and this comes, in toto from the UNCRPD, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Meaning what? Meaning that yes, we have people with certain impairments, not handicap, not disability, impairments, like some people see less, some people hear less, some people understand less. But these are not disabilities, they're just impairments. It's a physical difficulty, which in interaction with various barriers, and what are the barriers? Like you and me, society puts up those barriers. These barriers hinder their full and effective participation. So the die is cast, the onus for the disability is on society. Yes, impairments are there in some people, but they're not disabilities. It's when they face these barriers in society that disability emerges as an evolving concept. And that's a huge shift. That's a huge shift from earlier definitions of disability. And this, as I said, comes from CRPD. Now, reasonable accommodation, Dr. Punani dealt with yesterday, Dr. Mukhopadhyay dealt with yesterday, and I'm not defining it. I'm just telling you that 5 times in the RPWD Act, it is mentioned 2Y, which is in the definition part, 3.5, 12.3, 16.3 and 4, which is the chapter on education, and 23, which is a chapter on employment. So what is reasonable accommodation? In NEP, it translates into individualized support, 6.4. I want you to remember that accessibility is a group right, but reasonable accommodation is an individual right. Individual right. Each child has the right for his education, his employment to be accommodated as per his needs. But of course, it mentions not undue burden. I mean, you don't walk into a rural school and expect the child who is actually put in a second floor classroom. You don't expect the school to develop a ramp, or you don't expect a lift, but you do expect that the teacher or the principal allows that class to be transferred to the ground floor. So reasonable accommodations, I have given certain pictures here, which includes a table on a table, which includes the use of manipulatives in the classroom like numbers, which includes peer tutoring, which includes group learning. So reasonable accommodation paves the way for a whole new paradigm in the education of persons with disabilities. Teachers, please use this concept. I come to civil and political rights, which are the duties of appropriate government. See, what are they? The civil rights are, of course, access to civil rights include the legal capacity, which we didn't have earlier when it came to disabled people. Now they have legal capacity to open a bank account, to sign a contract, even if it is for a gas connection. So these are civil rights, which are very important to remember: access to justice. Pehle nahi tha. And this is a big change. So they are protected from cruelty and inhuman treatment, abuse, violence, exploitation. If you do research on them, prior permission from them is required. Then inclusion in emergency. Remember, emergency and disaster management came in through the SDGs, was included, it's in the CRPD, came in through the Sendai framework in 2016, and also in our RPD Act. Because people with disabilities are at greater risk when there is an emergency, when there is a disaster. So political rights include accessibility in voting time, and we've seen that happen very recently. As you know, our chief minister had to use a wheelchair to even go and speak from the dais. So right to access any tribunal authority and right to home. Now, 4 and 5, I want to highlight sections 4 and 5 RPWD Act, specific focus areas for women and children with disabilities so that they can enjoy their rights equally with others. They have a right to live in the community, not obliged to live in a home or any by force situation. Then the support to women for their livelihood and the bringing up of their children. And I remember Meera Kumarji insisted on this, the disabled women need support to bring up their children. And this was added in the RPWD Act. There's 5% reservation on poverty alleviation schemes. And within that 5% reservation for benchmark disabilities, there should be priority for women with benchmark disabilities. So this one, and then skill development and employment. This is chapter 4, section 19 to 23. This is interesting because the law provides for horizontal inclusion. जो बाकी सबके लिए programs है, people with disabilities have to be accommodated, not pushed in, but this training has to be accommodated for them. At the same time, there has to be vertical programs specifically for them. So there's a horizontal approach as well as a vertical approach in the inclusion process when it comes to both education and employment and sports, recreation, culture, this whole entire process. So reasonable accommodation comes in skill development. And if a person acquires a disability while he is working, you cannot deny him his promotion. And if he doesn't have, if the company or the office doesn't have a similar kind of post for him, he will get the same rank and the same salary at a supernumerary post. And later on, when a post emerges, he will be included there. So there's a grievance redressal office within the employment premises, there's equal opportunity policy, lots of things in terms of skill development and employment. And so also in social security, health, rehabilitation, and recreation. In the health area, we have to look at, again, the vertical special programs for disabled people, also priority within the general treatment, whether it's in OPD or whether it's in-house separate beds, etc. Free healthcare, awareness on prevention, all of these sports, recreation comes in within the rehabilitation framework as well as in the education framework. So health, this young boy you see here is Pranav Bakshi. You may have heard of him. He's the first model in India who has autism. And he's like, autism is my strength. So these are role models that have evolved over the years, which weren't there earlier. So benchmark disabilities and high support needs, section 31 to 38, they get free education up to 18. They have a choice of schools, where I skipped the education part in my presentation because both Sudeshji and Bhushan Punani dealt with them earlier in detail, and that's a whole lot of things given in the chapter 3, section 16 and 17. So in the benchmark disability, they have a choice whether they want to go to a special school or a regular school defined as a neighborhood school. But in higher education, there's a 5% reservation for them and 5% extra marks in the application form. The most important part, I suppose, for a large group of people with disabilities is the expansion of the disability quota. Earlier, it was 3%. That's one for visually impaired, one for hearing impaired, one for mobility. Now they've added 1% more in the autism, intellectual disability, SLD category, plus multiple disability. Now, this is an important part which I want to flag, that when there was 1% reservation for persons with blindness and low vision, there was a lot of anger among people with blindness because they felt that the low vision people will automatically get preference for employment. Similarly, in the mobility 1% reservation, there was a lot of anger from persons who had cerebral palsy, because CP was included under locomotor earlier, because people who have profound disabilities with cerebral palsy will not be preferred over somebody who has more limited or very moderate kind of physical disability. So these issues are there even now when you say 1% more for persons with intellectual disability, SLD, mental illness, multiple disability. Obviously, a person with SLD will get a preference within this 1%. But I also want to flag that unless this category of people with disabilities get good education, they will not be eligible for that 1% requirement in employment. So education prevails over everything else. And I want to complete this section on RPWD Act, Chapter 13, Special Court. And this cannot be underscored often enough, because people with disabilities didn't have access to justice, didn't have access to legal capacity. Now there are special courts, special prosecutor, even at the district level. Chapter 14, a national fund, which is a new one. Then we have state fund. But most important to me is Chapter 16, offenses and penalties. And what are they? The first time there's a punitive measure in a disability-related law. And what is that? That if you insult, harass, exploit, abuse a person with disability, you can be punished with fines, with jail terms, and the fines can go up to 1 lakh, can go up to your jail term can go up to 5 years. So this offenses and penalties for fraudulently availing of benefits meant for persons with disabilities, even if it's a family member, they can be prosecuted. This is giving real teeth to the RPWD Act, which the PwD Act didn't have. It had no penal measures. So this alternative punishments, any kind of punishment is now possible. And 1 or 2 people get that punishment, and it's sort of media brings it to the forefront, then you will find a lot of abuses against people with disabilities going down. And I just wanted to mention also that the reasonable accommodation part was interesting, that there was this one guy in Kerala who was very severely disabled, but he couldn't travel and he needed to sit for an university examination. So he applied to the university, no positive response. Then he applied to the Chief Commissioner for Disability, which is the grievance redressal mechanism within the RPWD Act. And the Chief Commissioner's office referred it to the State Commissioner, and the State Commissioner hauled up the university for reasonable accommodation. And this guy was then allowed to write his university exams from his own home. So as people have been telling you in the last 2 days, use the act. It's a piece of paper if you don't use it. And governments are not going to come to your doorstep to get it implemented. We have to fight for it. We have to come forward and create that awareness and let people know that there are mechanisms for redressal, for grievances. It's up to us to implement the law. So now I come to the RCI, which is the Rehabilitation Council of India Act. And this was a society earlier from 86, and in 92, it became an act of parliament. There was huge anger across the country, especially the leading NGOs who were running their own courses, didn't want to change. I mean, who's RCI, they said, to come and tell us what to do and what not to do? What do they know? They're just a government body. And it took at least 10 years for Dr. J.P. Singh, who was then the member secretary, to bring down that level of anger. And today, Dr. Subodh Kumar, who is the RCI member secretary, between them, they've had now excellent relationships with the organizations that run the RCI course. So what is the chief function of the RCI? It says here, it is a mandate to regulate and monitor services given to persons with disabilities. Fortunately, this was later modified. It is not to monitor services, but to standardize and regulate training programs at all levels in the field of rehabilitation and special education. It also maintains a central register for qualified professionals and personnel. And also in 2002, it was amended, the RCI Act, to include research. So the most important thing here, message to be given, is that you cannot run a course on disability, rehabilitation, and special education without the prior approval of RCI. And RCI as a body is set up in New Delhi, and we're all members of various expert committees. They are now in the process of amending the Act, and it is certainly due for amendment. It's up on their website. If you have any suggestions, please respond. So their course specializations are 16 in number. This is what the mandate has been given to them. They have a schedule of 16 types of expert courses that they can run, but the majority is in special education, various disabilities, clinical and rehab psychology, prosthetics and orthotics, CBR, social work, counseling, speech, and hearing. In the next slide, I'm showing you the growth of the RCI courses. It started slowly, as I said, and today they have over 700 universities, very large organizations and departments running, and NGOs running across the country in every state. Some more, like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, have more and some less, but they are represented across the country. And they have, the interesting part is to remember that for some reason, in 2018-19, the number of courses were 19,706. 2019-20, the number of seats available came down to 18,575. Now, why is that? There are extraneous factors, because SSA in some states are not allowing special educators to have the same level of employment as other teachers. Whereas in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, you see what they're getting the same salaries, they're getting the same benefits. So there's a lot of work ahead for us to encourage other people, other teachers, other students to come forward and avail of RCI courses, so that our children with disabilities get the best of services and the best of facilities. Please remember, a service is only as good as the service provider. You can't have excellent services. You can't have 50,000 services across the country, and you can't run them with 20,000 people. So the extent, the coverage, and the quality of the services that every state government and every central government, including National Trust and DPWD, is only as good as the number and the quality of professionals trained. So this is how they have registered professionals. The last data I have is 2019 and 20. Now it's over 140,000 people registered with the RCI. Now, for many countries, this is huge in absolute numbers, but in terms of percentage for a large country, we need many, many more. This is how they run their expert committees for each type, and they have certificate courses, diploma courses, BEd, MEd up to MPhil. And for each of these, they have separate committees. And this is the last one that we took. Sujata is there, Varsha is there, I've shown an arrow. We're all in Guwahati. This is a national level meeting of experts. And that's the last time we met physically, where many people couldn't come because of their prior appointments, but this was one of the last where we sat down and worked out an action plan, which has been endorsed by the board of the RCI, which includes the vision of NEP. It was then NEP 2019, and many of the changes made then in that action plan is now being implemented, and courses are being converged where they find fewer takers. But it's an excellent organization being run. It's a very vital place, RCI. I come to the National Trust. You see the logo up there, it has 5 hands, and it was developed by a parents organization in Bangalore. Smikyalika Samarth Sashakt. So Sangatit, 3 things. And there are 5 hands: autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, then called mental retardation, and multiple disability, which has 2 hands. So that was designed by parents organization, and the shelter on top and the 2 hands in terms of protection. This was a law which was 11 years in the making. Started from 1987, where the Mental Health Act then of separated legal guardianship for mental retardation. And so we had to have a separate law for these persons with intellectual disability, etc., to provide legal guardianship, because Mental Health Act from 1912, that law got changed, modified, adapted, which was necessary. But then we found a situation where people with intellectual disabilities had no course for legal guardianship, which they absolutely need, most of them, not all. So it started with intellectual disability, mental retardation. Then there was a lot of advocacy. I fought, and we added cerebral palsy. Mary Barua fought, added ASD, autism spectrum disorders. And Akhil and his group, they fought and added multiple disabilities. So it was an evolving trust, and it's meant to be a protective, caring, scheme-oriented and legal guardianship. So I was the first chairperson in 2011. I was the first person from the NGO sector to be given a rank of the Secretary to the Government of India, including salary, benefits, etc. And Uma Tuli joined a week after me as Chief Commissioner. So that was the first time that this happened in the Ministry of Social Justice. There were earlier ones who were chairpersons of different boards, but they were honorary, whereas we were actually paid according to the all the benefits. It hurt me initially to use a first class seat that was secretary was entitled to. I would travel economy, and then I found that when I was visiting the states, when I crisscrossed the country, because there was no awareness about this act, and when I crisscrossed the country and I landed in where a state protocol officer was there to receive me, he found that all the first class passengers had deboarded, and so he left. He didn't see me, he left. But I came in the economy passenger. He was absolutely stunned to see that. And I found that, well, maybe I need to modify myself rather than expect them to change their protocols. So there were lots of things in the initial couple of years. Establishing the National Trust, everybody was asking, is it an NGO? Is it a government organization? What's happening? What do they do? So I had to sensitize district magistrates, because the National Trust is a very unique kind of act. It has 2 arms. One is the registered organizations, NGOs, and one is the government organization. So it's like a shared participatory kind of, it was meant to be a very non-sarkari kind of effort, which did well very initially. Now it's facing some problems, but it was meant the board was the supreme body, and the board is divided exactly in half, half government people, half non-government people, and they had to be elected. So I fought for this one clause where 1/3 of the board members would be people with these disabilities. And this was a drafting committee in 1994, and they said, are you mad? Who and can any of these sit on the board? And I said, if you don't include that, I'm going to exit from the drafting committee and I'm going to leave this work. And then finally, the end, after a lot of sulking, at the end of the day, they relented and they said, okay. And today, that is the strongest part. That was, strongest part of the National Trust, that although it took 11 years in the making, because they couldn't, the government fell in between by one vote, Mr. Vajpayee's government. So it took 11 years, but when it came through, it was a very strong, very powerful, very person with disability oriented act. So it's a very unique one, which we have to see how it is, how the next few years pan out. It is, pictures here show you that it has its own money, which is very interesting. And from that money, they can give awards. They can give, they have many schemes. And some I started, some my successor Poonam started. And there are a lot of success stories within this group. So here, the main objective in the National Trust is to enable and empower persons with disabilities to live as independently and as fully as possible within and as close to their community as possible. I wrote that sentence. We were struggling with what the objective was. I got tired and I went to the blackboard and I wrote this. Everyone said, fine. So that became a starting point, that this is for people not to be put in homes unnecessarily, but to live within the community and independently. And of course, for legal guardianship. So today there are a plethora of schemes that they have. Disha is for early intervention, Vikas is daycare center, Samarth is for both daycare and group homes. We had respite care homes, we had residential care. Gharonda is for long-term stay for persons who have no family. Niramaya is the insurance scheme, health insurance scheme. Sahayogi, which I started as caregivers and now are called Sahayogis, is a caregivers training for working with these particular kind of 4 types of people with disabilities, which is now recognized by the RCI. It was a long battle. They wouldn't recognize it because they said it's not part of our work. In fact, when I wrote first to the RCI, you have to recognize a course for autism, they said, no, we won't. Who are the people who are going to be the trainers for autism? We don't have any experts in India. And it was a long battle between chairman of RCI and me, chairperson of National Trust. And I said, you have to, because the first MBBS course was started by people who came from abroad and taught the first batch. And people like who were in the labs, assistants, they participated. So there has to be a first time and you have to start. So it was a long battle, but we finally won. And today we have autism specific courses at certificate level, diploma level, and at BEd level across the country. And they really needed to be separate. So I come now to the SDG. We discussed this, Dr. Punani did, and it's directly referenced in Goal 4, Goal 8, 10, 11, and 17. But it's also indirectly referenced in all-encompassing all, ALL, in other goals. And persons with disability is one of 12 groups within the in the world that are recognized by the UN. This slide is to show you that there is a lot of synergy, and I worked very hard on this, synergy between the SDG 4, which is education, and SDG 4 is the fulcrum of all the goals. Every goal passes through the SDG 4, all 17. A lot of this NEP 2020 is merged with the goals of SDG, as well as with the RPD. And it's, what Dr. Punani was saying yesterday and what I'm reaffirming is that NEP 6.7 and 8 merges with RPD for section 1, which is 4.5 of SDG, eliminate gender disparities. Look at 4.1, universal primary and secondary education, which works with 8.8 and NEP 8.8, RTE, and the RPWD chapter 3. Then early childhood education, NEP is in 1.3 and 1.4. RPD Act also includes that. Technical, vocational, and tertiary education, 4.3 of SDG in NEP 16.4, RPD 19. And then literacy, numeracy. So all of these important facets of the SDG 4 has been taken on board the RPD Act as well as the NEP 2020. There's a lot of synergy, and this did not happen by chance. It's a result of a lot of work. And in this one slide, again, I worked very hard on this, is to show the synergy between RPD Act, RTE 2009, NEP 2020. And what are the commonalities? I've highlighted them in different highlight colors. In RPD Act, to provide inclusive education, section 16, 17, 31. And in NEP, to provide equitable and inclusive education. This is including SLD in 6. Appropriate environment, section 31. Caring and inclusive school culture in 5.13 in NEP. Access to pedagogically competent teachers. And this is something we still don't have across the country. This is one of the major issues where we are not being able to implement so well, is the access to pedagogically competent teachers, 17B in RPD, special training in resource centers in RTE, and in NEP, it's trained teachers in chapter 5.26, 6.14, and 6.19 in the NEP. So children with disabilities have a right to inclusive education, as has been said by previous speakers. They have a right to pedagogically competent teachers, and they have a right to appropriate environments, including research center, etc. So these are the commonalities between the three. But to me, the game changers, the real game changers in terms of policy and legislation for inclusive education is RPD 2016 and NEP 2020. And why is this? Because they have a social definition of disability. They're looking at the barriers that society puts up. And most importantly, the onus is not on the child with disability, as is to be earlier. If the child comes into the school because he's a meritorious child, but the onus is on him to change, to adapt to the system. Whereas these two, RPD and NEP, talks about the system that has to change, the system that has to reduce the barriers to inclusion and clear the path for a trajectory and multiple pathways towards inclusion. Both of them, of course, RPD is grounded in inclusion, of course, but NEP also is grounded in the inclusion of the SEDGs, or the socially, economically, and disadvantaged groups, including children with disabilities. So the onus now is on systemic transformation, not so much the child's responsibility to pass or fail or to succeed. It's the system's responsibility to ensure that they are there and that they succeed and that they go to higher education. That's huge. So this is the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities from 2012. We have a separate department. So far, 31 states have notified the rules. 31 states have state advisory boards, which is very important to give the direction to what the state governments have to do. There are 12 translations of the Act, only 3 are official. 24 states already have special courts. 15 states have independent state commissioners. And just now, UDID card portal, swavalambancard.gov.in, is gazetted on the 5th of May 21. And from now on, it is the UDID which will become the passport for persons with disability. And across all, whether you're applying for a railway pass, whether you're applying for admission to a school, this UDID card will be a universal identity card, will be your passport. So there are many schemes under the DPWD, but the most important to me is the scholarships one. Please write to scholarships portal, scholarships.gov.in, which gives very good scholarships up to international learning, international education for persons with disabilities from class 8 onwards. So their work in the COVID times has been very good. They've developed guidelines. They've developed convergence with other ministries, particularly Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. And they have trained a lot of rehab workers to be COVID workers. So this is, and now I come to the data framework. There are 2.21% persons with disabilities, although the WHO and UNICEF, in their report, they say there are at least 5 to 8% persons. So this time we are, I think the coming census, which got delayed, will, the next one will be done under the Washington Group form of taking statistics for persons with disabilities, and that will give us a completely different picture. This is what they did in Bangladesh, and they found difference of about 6% between what their census people did and what they did under the guidance of the Washington Group of the UN. So this is our difference in terms of the largest group in disability are persons with movement issues, followed closely by those with hearing and those with visual impairments. Important and worrying is that there's a large group, 18.4, 18.7, under any other. Now, what does that mean? It means that they have not been identified properly. And that's not something that should be there. So this is a large group, any other cannot be multiple because multiple is given separately. They just have not been able to identify. It could be autism, it could be SLD, it could be others. And this is the transition rate for education. Horrible, really abysmal transition rate starting. If you look from primary to higher secondary, look how it's less than 1/8 of the children with disabilities. They're dropping out in very large numbers. And who are the ones who are dropping out most? Are those with mental illness, mental retardation, multiple disability, and any other. So this is taken from the UNESCO. Now, this is the institutional framework. There is a Department of Empowerment under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. They have 3 statutory bodies, the Chief Commissioner's Office, there's the RCI and the National Trust. There's the National Handicap Finance Development Corporation, which give loans even for training. And then there are national institutes, 8. There are CRCs, the Composite Regional Centers under the national institutes, and DDRCs, almost 300 by now. So apart from the Government of India, each state government has a state department headed by a secretary, which is either social welfare or social justice and empowerment, and right up to the district rehabilitation officer. Then the other central governments that work for disability are health, labor, education, rural development, women and child, etc. So this is the institutional framework. And each of these ministries have separate schemes that can be availed. And I've given a list here, which I don't want to deal with in detail. This is the services framework for persons with disability. These are the core services we are looking at. And then there are support services. Of course, families and communities are the very basis, belief in human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the grievance redressal framework. I want to talk about this paradigm shift. Initially, we were in a medical model where we looked at where the doctor was at the center of planning and the rehab team, and the person with disabilities was outside the planning. He had to do exactly what others decided for him. Then we moved to the social model, and now we are at the human rights model, where the person with disability not only makes his own decisions about his own personal trajectory in life, but he can also tell the supporting team what he needs as per his wishes. Poverty is the first issue I want to flag, and I want to talk about a few issues. I think there are 7 or 8. Poverty, issue of challenge of extreme poverty in our country. And there is a bidirectional link between poverty and disability. And what does poverty do to a person with disability? It gives poor nutrition, lack of health care, which can further reinforce the disability. Then you get limited access to education and training, diminishing employment, then you are isolated from the marketplace, puts you and your family in the economic strain, and the whole process, cycle of poverty and disability continues. So we have to break this bidirectional link between poverty and disability if we want to include them in rural and remote places as well. So there's interrelate, and because of the challenge of extreme poverty, the resources are poor. So state governments also face challenges of Anganwadis not being well resourced, of lights not being enough on the streets, technological divide. Most children with disabilities in the rural areas don't get access to the technological apps, as well as to electricity sometimes. Then there is the issue of awareness. Look at this child who was born with 2 legs and 2 stomachs, and he cannot understand why everybody goes to school, but he sits in a little chair and people come and worship him, and his parents get money because they think that he is an avatar of God. So poverty exacerbates these myths and these issues, especially in rural areas, and lack of awareness doesn't help that. So this child sits on a chair and earns money for his family when he has 4 legs and 2 stomachs and 3 arms actually. Then there's a lack of parent motivation. You see this picture where the mother has some milk, she's feeding the calves, and the child is not getting, she doesn't believe, or the family doesn't believe that the child has any future. So this lack of motivation among parents about the belief in their education is another issue. So this is currently we have 4 options for education. One is special schools, one is home-based, one is neighborhood, one is NIOS, and all of these 4 are part of the NEP. And even then we have large dropouts. The question is, issue 6, we don't have enough capacity building of teachers. There are, and I have to say this with great humility, that this process that any DPEP that Dr. Mukhopadhyay talked about, we had the same joint secretary in the social welfare department. It was then called social welfare, and he had given me, when I was working with the Spastic Society of Tamil Nadu, 15 lakhs to start a training center in cerebral palsy and in intellectual disability, MR. So he then was transferred to be joint secretary, DPEP, and he came to Chennai to see their office, and without telling me, he just dropped in to see what I had done with that 15 lakhs. Fortunately, the building was ready. And he went around the center and he said, Aloka, these children should be in regular schools. And I said, Aapne to aapke DPP mein IED ke koi component banaye nahi. You haven't made any provision for that. Believe me, that man was so good. Within 1 month, as soon as he went back to Delhi, he talked to NCRT, we developed a framework, came to Tamil Nadu state government called me, we signed an MOU, and from there on, DPEP in Tamil Nadu and then in other states, then that morphed.
Dr. Guha, ma'am. Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you, but you're gone on mute.
Unmute yourself, Aloka.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when did I go on mute?
Just a second back.
Okay, so I was talking to you about Mr. Pandey, R.S. Pandey,
Yes.
and he helped us to do inclusive education in the DPEP, and then that came into SSA, and all over the country, today we have 30 lakh children with disabilities, but are they learning? They're not always learning. They come into school now because they recognize, teachers and principals recognize that they have to be there. It's part of their RTE arrangement, but the teachers are not trained. And what are they not trained in? In inclusive pedagogies, in subject teaching, and in cross-disability. But still, when people say nothing is happening, I will disagree with them heartily. A lot has happened, but as Sudeshji said, the glass is filling up, not at the rate that we would like them to. So throughout this challenge, RPD looks at special schools and neighborhood schools. RTE looks at neighborhood schools and home-based education. NEP has solved that issue. They look at 3: special schools, neighborhood schools, and home-based education. But in the RPD, there are special schools. MHRD has no jurisdiction over them. And MSJE has no jurisdiction over neighborhood schools. So there are these gaps. It's a huge issue, the gaps in jurisdiction. And therefore, one of the reasons why the implementation is slowed down is because of the gaps in jurisdiction. And COVID times, you can see, and all of you know that, yes, those with mental health issues have been the hardest hit, and many have developed comorbidities of mental health with other disabilities. Some 50 million children with disabilities have dropped out of school. But we have no data on whether how many had COVID. No discrete data is available. But persons with intellectual disability and multiple disability have been hardest hit. A person with autism cannot comprehend why, an ASD is routine-based people, children. They can't understand why they can't go to school, why they want to put on their uniform and go off. And that's hard on them, that you create a little space within your home, which is designated as school time. But all the NGOs have come forward wonderfully, and I'm sure Arushi has too, in doing home-based online training, and all over the country this has been going on. Yes, the first month was very difficult. Slowly people learned to support home-based learning, and there are many organizations, NGOs, who've gone door to door and delivered food packets for the children with disabilities and their families. But they've been very hard hit. As I was saying earlier, a young man of 39, 40 with mental health, with intellectual disability, he wouldn't wear a mask. His parents tried to inform him, he wouldn't. And finally, the father reached a point where he got hold of this boy's neck and unwittingly strangled him to death. So COVID has not been kind to us. We have to understand what I'm saying in this is, let's not be equal anymore. Let's be equitable. Let's give people what they need, not what they can do jugaad for themselves. So let's not be equal, because if you see in this picture, this child, even with an equal height stool, cannot see or doesn't have the same outcome. Of course, the best answer is to remove all the barriers, but till then, let's do equitable education. And this is my last slide, where there are interstate and intrastate differences in the implementation of the laws. Even within the state, there are, what Madras does in terms of inclusive education may not be the same as what Dindigal does, but efforts are there and things are definitely improving. So this is the earlier system where we beat the child, beat him, पीट के उनको fit करने की कोशिश की. But after that, inclusive education, where the teacher and the peer group are helping this child, and the teacher has these lovely visual schedules on the wall, etc. And this is the Pati Charcha Sugamyata, which is what we are looking for now, where the child, as he is, with his walking frame, comes up to the board, and the board is lowered down so he can reach it, and he has the opportunity to participate in the learning process. So thank you. Thank you to your Vice Chancellor. Thank you to Sujata Bhan ma'am, and thank you to the entire department This is a plethora of thank yous. God bless you all. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aloka Di, for this wonderful, visually stimulating presentation as always. You have a knack in making these wonderful, wonderful presentations because we talk about stimulus variation for the students. So this is a very apt example, which I'm sure all the students sitting in the audience will appreciate, that this is what gets their attention. And I can't resist but interrupt Betty's, she has to thank, but I just can't restrain. So thank you very much. It's again like so much of information given, but so beautifully like narrating a story, and we just get so engrossed. Thank you very, very much. Betty, there are a few questions, so if we can take just a couple of them.
Yes, I will just, if it's okay with Dr. Guha, I will just read out a few of them. One of the questions that was asked, ma'am, was what are the provisions available in rural area for certification and diagnosis of individuals with intellectual disability?
Shall I answer that?
Yes, please, ma'am.
The guidelines as shared by Sudesh ji, and I removed that, whether it's autism or whether it's other disabilities. And although the UDID card is notified, process was notified in May, it may not reach the rural areas. So it is still the district medical hospital, which will constitute a medical board for identifying and certifying a person with intellectual disability. And the guidelines for that are available, which Sudesh, I think, has already shared that. So there are no easy answers to getting a disability card, and it's still a long process, but and 21 disabilities makes it that much more difficult. But the process remains the same, that the medical board is set up for each type of disability, and the intellectual disability must include a psychiatrist. There are so few clinical psychologists that now, very recently, they're allowing special educators to be part of that certification process. But teachers are not, as Sudesh mentioned again and again, teachers are not meant to certify. It's the medical board that will give you that passport, that certificate of disability. Benchmark. And you know, the sad thing is, I remember inspecting certain schools under an MHRD program. And while I was talking to the principal, this mother came up and said to her, मेरे बच्चे को आप disability certificate दे दो. So then the principal says, but आपका बच्चा तो विकलांग नहीं है, क्यों? नहीं मैं चाहती हूँ. देखो वो बोल नहीं पाती है. Actually the child could speak, but because of the provisions that were being given for children with disabilities, the mother wanted that disability card, and that was so heartbreaking.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question that was put is the aim to achieve the SDG by 2030, yet many are still unaware of the SDGs. Hence, it could suggest what are the different ways to embed the teaching of SDGs in the curriculum.
Sudesh, do you want to answer that, or should I?
I think she's not there anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
SDGs is a Government of India, they've signed, so it's a responsibility, and many states recently in the Northeast where I've been working, I know Assam is working very closely on implementing the SDGs, and SDG 4 is the most important one for almost the entire world because it's on education and education for all. So as Sudesh mentioned, that the new curriculum framework is being developed by the NCRT, and some of you are part of that. And the interesting part is that now the Ministry of Social Justice and the Ministry of Human Resource Development, now called Ministry of Education, will be working together in the interest of children with disabilities. So SDG 4 targets that are specific to disability related, I think there are 3. Those will be looked at by the government together. 2 ministries. That convergence was not always there earlier, but thanks to NEP, thanks to RPWD, a lot of the convergence is happening now. When it will enter the curriculum, I think only NCRT will be able to say that, but it's in everybody's mind, the policymakers' mind, the authors' minds, the experts' minds. So there is no way it's going to be left out in the very near future.
Thank you.
Betty, I think, yeah.
Yes, I think one more question. How much time do you think that the NEP 2020 will take to come at the ground level? Basically, implementation.
Is Sudeshji there?
No, she's not there. She's not there.
Okay, I think we can all answer that because I know NCRT and Sujata ji knows also, and she's been working with them closely also, that there's an effort by the central government to implement the NEP. But let me also tell you that because education is in the concurrent list, many not many, I know a few state governments are not willing to implement it. Are they not willing to implement it because of political reasons? That I'm not willing to answer. But yes, some states have already taken steps to change the curriculum and to bring reforms in the school education framework, as also in the teacher education framework. So she mentioned that it's going, and NEP gives timelines for many things, which our earlier policies didn't. So I reckon by the end of 2022, we will see all of these evolving policies now actually coming to fruition, and we should be able to implement by the end of next year in far greater detail.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. What we will do is mail the questions to our resource persons, both Sudesh ma'am and Dr. Guha ma'am, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond to those questions. What we're going to do now is, Sunanda, Sunanda, are you here? Yes.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes, I'm here. I'm here very much. So, dear ma'am, Aloka ma'am, your presentation was it was really, you know, the audience are really thrilled by it. Actually, your oratorical style, your the graphical representation and the stories of your own experience. They have just connected those grassroots level to the formation of these laws, and that has gone into us so easily, because otherwise we just stare at the laws and we think that we have to follow that, but the background we just really don't come to know, and so it, you know, it becomes very tough for us. But it was so eloquent to understand how such things are fun and how many people are involved behind all these to work, and that's where we respect humanity. Thank you, ma'am, for such a beautiful presentation, and thank you so much to be here. And Dr.
God bless you. Actually, we discussed yesterday, Sujata ji, that we are all a family. Yes. So you guys don't have to thank us at all. It's a pleasure to be here.
No. Yes, thank you. Thank you. We still have to thank the family members as well all the time. And we'll see you tomorrow. If you have time, please join us at the time of valedictory at least. So, Betty, do you have to make any announcements?
Yes, yes. So,
okay. So thank you, Alokadi. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yes.
So this brings us to the end of day 2. It's been a day of intensive learning, and thanks to both our resource person, Professor Sudesh Mukhopadhyay and Dr. Aloka Guha, for accepting our invitation and being the resource persons for this national webinar and sharing their knowledge with us. So thank you. The feedback links are being posted in the Zoom and YouTube chat boxes. Please do share your feedback to help us enhance our services to you, for the audience. In the meanwhile, I request all of you to please switch on your cameras for a group photograph. So while we wait for the photograph to happen, the resource persons for tomorrow are Professor Anupam Ahuja and Professor Anita Julka, who will be sharing their thoughts on the topics of goalposts for inclusive education and role of international organizations in education, respectively. Okay, for all those who can switch on their cameras, please do so. Yeah, Yuki ma'am. It's wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. lot of our alumni and participants who've been regularly a part of the DSC events. So it really is very morale boosting for us to see you come back and to hear your feedback and be able to improve ourselves and offer more to you.
Yeah, the photos are done.
Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We will see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye and stay safe. Take care. Yeah. DSC team can, faculty can just stay back for a minute and, or you want to move to the room, Betty? Do you want to?
We can switch to the breakout room, ma'am.
Yeah, I think that will be quicker. So we can switch. The feedback form link has been put in the chat box.
Yes. It's been posted in the group, in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yeah. And even in Telegram, you can post it, Yukti.
Ma'am, we are not posting it in Telegram.
Okay,
We are just posting
all
it
right,
in
all right,
YouTube.
all right. All right, that's
Okay, please.
Ishita is here. Yes.
No, we still have many people. Are we making the room, Betty?
I am, ma'am. I'm in the process of assigning everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Betty,
I think.
we can't get the feedback form.
What's wrong with feedback form, Ramya? Can you check the feedback form? There is some issue there.
As Sunanda left, I'm not able to find her.
She'll send it again. Just give us a moment. Ramya, please post it again and make sure that it can be clicked.
Yeah, thank you.
Got it? All right.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay,
Sunanda, are you here?
Well, I can't see Sunanda. Anyway, whoever is here, let's go.
Done, ma'am. I'm just clicking the rooms open.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone in the audience. You can leave the meeting now.